Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I actually want to start today's episode talking about Deflategate. You might be wondering, what does Tom Brady and his cheating in the qualifying game for the Super Bowl have to do with movies? But just hear me out. So to just give you a quick refresher, Tom Brady and the Patriots, New England Patriots, were accused of deflating footballs, for the qualifying game for what team would move on to the Super Bowl. It was apparently a rainy day, and if balls are underinflated, they're easier to catch and to hold on to. So this was investigated, I believe, by an outside party. The NFL brought in an outside party to investigate, and their findings were that two employees of the Patriots were in on this, but also that Tom Brady. They said, well, they didn't have, I believe, concrete proof. It was, pretty much concrete, and they believe that it was, I think the language was something like, it's more likely than not that Tom Brady knew. And Tom Brady, by the way, would not hand over his cell phone or allow them access to his emails, etc. But they did find him. They did find him from the other end of some of his conversations from the phones of these two employees. So it looks pretty bad for Tom Brady, and they just handed down the punishment. And it's a 4-game suspension at the beginning of the 2015 season. Although only one of those games is televised, so I don't know how big of a slap on the wrist that is. $1 million fine to the Patriots, even though the findings said that the team management and the ownership did not know about this. And also they had to sacrifice, I believe, their 2016 first-round draft pick and something in 2017, like a fourth-round draft pick. By the way, on a side note, if you haven't seen Draft Day with Kevin Costner, go watch it. You'll understand how important those losses are, and it's just a great movie. I really love Draft Day, and if you like the business of movies, you'll love the business of football. It's a fantastic movie, and it also shows you just how beautiful stadiums are, and that working in football is a pretty nice job. So that's the punishment to the Patriots and Tom Brady. And so there's a lot of talk today about what this will mean for ratings for football season, and obviously a lot of Patriots fans are upset. And then there are some people, I believe, if I'm getting the conversation correct from the way I've surveyed it so far, if you're a football fan, please sound off down below on your thoughts on this from that perspective. But some people are saying, the punishment for, domestic abuse and those things are more significant than the slap on the wrist that Tom Brady is getting, or less. There's some discrepancy. I feel, irregardless of the punishment being doled out for those other offenses, I feel this seems like a pretty light punishment to me. I mean, what's $1 million to the Patriots? It's like nothing. It's probably their lunch tab. So I think it's really nothing. So the reason it's on Morning Movie News is that Tom Brady is, the word on the street is that he is aggressively planning a movie career after he's done with his football career. He feels he can do it. He feels he's such a big star that he should be able to cross over into Hollywood. Now, usually NFL players cross over into commenting on network television or cable television like ESPN for their sport. That's the main place to go. It's where you can make a lot of money and you can play out the rest of your career for the rest of time until you don't want to work anymore for some reason. So that's where he would usually go. But he's convinced that he can go to movies. Now, I don't really believe any football players have been able to transition to movies beyond a couple of glorified cameos. And Tom Brady already has those lined up. He's going to be in Ted 2 and also in Entourage. But expect to see more of that because he's really trying to open people up to the idea that he can be in movies. But nobody, I think, has ever really become an actor. I think the closest we've come to that is Brooklyn Decker, but that's again a model, and she's just in the sports world. For some reason, she came to mind actually to me because she dates a tennis player, Andy Roddick. So models can transition into movies sometimes, but the reason this actually works as a segue is because I believe the person behind all this is his wife, Tom Brady's wife, the supermodel Giselle, who actually has come to become quite hated in the areas of football because she's just such a horrible person, apparently. She's really rude to the other players. She's apparently just a monster in the stands and believes her husband deserves special treatment. I believe she was also behind that crazy long hairstyle he was rocking for a while. So I'm sure that Giselle, who herself tried to get into Hollywood, by the way, you might recall her ill-fated turn in Taxi, the American remake, but I'm sure she's like, well, why couldn't you go to Hollywood? Why couldn't you transition? Look at your movie star looks. And it's it's comments like that make Tom Brady and Giselle so unlikable to everybody else. But I'm curious, do you want to see Tom Brady in movies? If you did want to see Tom Brady in movies, does Deflategate change your opinion on that at all? Do you think it'll hurt him in that regard? Or do you think Deflategate will deflate, go away, and not be a big problem for him anymore in the NFL or in Hollywood? But an interesting situation and a horrible thing to happen to him, I think so close to when he would want to transition to Hollywood. If this happened early on in his career, he'd be like, well, 5 or 6 years from now, who's going to remember? Although something like this, I'm not sure how this works in sports. Will this haunt a player for a long period of time? We'll see. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, talking about something haunting somebody, I think that Marvel continues to be haunted by this Black Widow merchandising controversy. It is a huge problem for them, and I'm really surprised that the top brass at Marvel and Disney aren't making more aggressive moves to make this go away. And I think at this point it's become so horrible, and there's a new development today, which is why it's on Morning Movie News. But if I were Marvel, I'd be like, screw it, we need to greenlight a Black Widow movie. Put it out for some far release date, but put it on the table officially to shut this down, because it's not going away. Now, one of the reasons it's not going away is because they also continue to perpetrate it from their side. But a lot of the things that are coming to light now were decided a long time ago, so they can't be changed at this point. It's like, I'm sure Marvel is sitting there in horror being like, oh man, wait till they see this toy. Oh, this is going to be so bad. And in fact, today we are discussing a toy. Now, you might have seen this, the Mary Sue covered this, it was tweeted out a lot, and that there was a toy that people discovered, which was the Quinjet, and the motorcycle. It was like a package toy that represents the South Korea highway chase sequence. However, instead of Black Widow being included in the action pack, because she is the one who rides the motorcycle out of the Quinjet, which is what this toy is supposed to help you to do, to replicate, they put Captain America in the toy pack, and he's the only figure. And then they said, oh, you can buy other characters to go along with this, other action figures, because there is room in the cockpit for another character. And then they listed off Black Widow as one of many you could purchase. But understandably, people were upset that she didn't even get to be in the toy that represents her own action sequence in the movie. Now, to be fair, Captain America is in that action sequence, but shouldn't he really come with the semi-truck that has Ultron as part of the set as well, right? And then you buy both and you can create the whole scene. That's kind of the way it should go, but it didn't go that way. And also someone pointed out that they had another motorcycle toy being sold with the film, and they put Iron Man on the motorcycle. I love toy logic. Why would Iron Man ride a motorcycle? Did he run out of power or something? He's like, I forgot to power myself up. I'm out of battery. Quick, give me a motorcycle. It makes no sense. And it actually reminds me of something that annoyed me about Watchmen. And I'm surprised that nobody made a big deal about this when that movie came out. But a lot of the lines that Silk Spectre had in the comic were given to male characters in the movie, even when she was still in the scene, which I thought was very odd. I was like, she's standing right there. Why can't she have her own line? I believe it's because Malin Ackerman, not a big star, although none of the male stars in that movie were particularly big either. But it might have been a case where they were like, well, Malin Ackerman's not a big enough actress. Let's go, why not satisfy our bigger, in comparison to Malin Ackerman's stars. But still, it was annoying and ridiculous. And if you don't think Malin Ackerman is a very good actress, you shouldn't have cast her. Maybe they cast her because she was willing to do that nude scene and also wear the costume. But I think a lot of actresses these days would wear the costume, right? And actually, it wasn't that revealing. The only thing revealing about that role was the sex scene. And many actresses are willing to go, go the full Monty. Look at Scarlett Johansson and Under the Skin. That shouldn't be something that keeps them from hiring the best talent possible. So anyway, that's a big problem, and I'm curious to how you feel about that. Or does it annoy you? A lot of you guys you say you don't get upset about this, but I'm curious, it is a problem, and I'm just surprised. I was thinking about this when I was coming into work this morning, and a lot of people are talking about, the situation with race relations isn't any different than the 1960s. And there was a really powerful cover for Time magazine where they took a picture of the Baltimore riots, and they crossed out 1965 and wrote 2015 and to show how little things have changed, and it really was shocking. But then when you see a lot of the things spewed on the internet, the recent hashtags against feminists, I don't know if you've seen those on Twitter, a really horrible trend where, what does a feminist look like, or feminists are ugly, or what is a feminist, how do you spot a feminist, really, really ugly and mean, social trends, which are just meant to goad women. And unfortunately, a lot of women, they should just ignore it, quite frankly, and then it would go away from trending. But anyway, it's another situation where you're like, I can't believe this is still the same thing and it hasn't changed. And when you see toys like this, it's the same thing. When you're like, why is this not any different? And that's why these toys and why people make such a big deal about it. And I know so that's why I want to explain to you why it's upsetting. Some people might be like, let it go, what do you care? You're not even going to buy the toy. But that's the issue. And also, I think people are wary of, the impression this is making on, younger fans, right? They're like, I loved Black Widow. I want a Black Widow action figure. Oh, look, there's the Quinjet and the motorcycle from the movie. What? Where is she? Why is Captain America here? Now, speaking of toys, Colin Hanks got in on this with his own, believe it was an Instagram thing that he sent out, but he also commented on this and got a lot of attention. And you want to give him the benefit of the doubt that this was a genuine story and he wasn't trying to be like, I'd like to get in on this publicity trend, because you always wonder, I don't know, it was weird to see Colin Hanks of all people jump into this. But if this story is true, and I believe it largely is, it was also very interesting. And what do you know? It was with another Disney property. So he said, from Star Wars Day, May the 4th, I introduced my young daughter, who's 4 years old, to the first Star Wars movie, not the prequels, A New Hope. So we watched it together, and she loved it, he said. Oh, she was so taken with it, and she loved Princess Leia. But then when we tried to watch the rest of the movies, she became bored because Princess Leia didn't have enough scenes, and she felt it was mostly he had like a quote from his daughter where she was like, this movie is all about the boys, and the girl has like just 1 or 2 scenes. I'm paraphrasing, of course. So he said, well, he thought that was disappointing right there. And then he said, so then we went to Toys R Us so I could buy her some Star Wars toys because she wanted them. So we go there, and I say, well, where are the lightsabers and everything? And they tell us they're in the boys department, the boys section of the toy store, which I've always found annoying, and I think this has annoyed female, purveyors of toys for decades, for so much time, since probably the beginning of these toys coming out. But anyway, so they had to go to the boys section. And there they found the toys, and he said they had a lightsaber. Princess Leia, of course, doesn't have a lightsaber, but they bought one for her. And then he said, well, we tried to get her a Princess Leia action figure, and lo and behold, the only one available was Slave Leia, who looked depressed because she was a slave, and also she was in that metal bikini. So he really was like, I don't think I can buy that for my daughter, because I guess that, that action figure is meant for older consumers, I think, and probably male ones, and also the cosplayers who want to appeal to those guys when they go to comic conventions. So I think that was really unfortunate, and and Colin Hanks talked about the fact that Kathleen Kennedy, and so did the Mary Sue, and the places that covered this, that Kathleen Kennedy said she wants to change this, so let's hope that when September 4th rolls around and they bring out their first round of toys for Star Wars The Force Awakens, there are better female toys available. So I'm curious, have any of you had this experience? What do you think of the situation? And do you understand why it's a problem? Or are you still in the camp that we're just, this is a bunch of white noise, like Charlie Brown's teacher, like, rah, 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 rah. And it's like, no, listen to what I'm saying, it's important. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is a fun one. And this is that Wes Anderson did the design for a cafe in Italy. I believe it's in Milan, and it's called Bar Loose. And so we have some wonderful photos here, and it's just really charming. And I think he has a future in interior design. My favorite aspects about the bar that he designed, I love the logo, Bar Loose. I think that's really great, and I love that it's on like that linen print. I think that looks fantastic. I love these chairs, these solo chairs, where you can sit like in this nice cushy little seat, but you also have like a little desk built in. I think that's adorable. I think that he has this just looks so pretty, as you can see the wall and everything and the floor. He has a jukebox in there, which is pretty awesome. I'm sure it has lots of wonderful Wes Anderson songs in there. He has a great ear for that as well. And then also you can see the ceiling, the way that's done, and the wallpaper, like a print of like an old Italian building, and it's just really gorgeous. And for him to recreate the wonder of his movies, this is a place that you could actually visit, is, I think, quite exciting. And kudos to this Bar Loose, and the people who own it, that they were able to make this happen and get Wes Anderson involved, and to have him say, hey Wes, your movies are so amazing with the visuals, why don't you incorporate that into something that people can actually go and visit, like a little Wes Anderson theme park. So I think this is wonderful. I'm sad it's only in Milan, but maybe perhaps Wes Anderson would consider doing more of this, in some of the major cities in the U.S., like New York, L.A., and because obviously those are the two big movie capitals. But of course, Atlanta is really getting on the board with movie production as well, and actually the whole country, because there's so many tax incentives. But I think Vegas even. I could you don't want to oversaturate the market like Hard Rock Cafe ended up doing, but I think that there's a genuine market for this. I mean, like, everyone talks about the popularity of hipsters today. This is like hipster mecca. So I love it. I think it's fantastic, and I'm curious to what you think of it, and if you think this is a good use of Wes Anderson's time, or he should only be making movies. All right, so the viewer question for the day is from Aiden Brooks, and this is another business question about contracts. So Aiden said, "Hey Grace, question. I read a relatively recent article where the director of Elf, Jon Favreau, said he hasn't yet made a single penny of profit from Elf, which is replayed on TV every year. However, he said he made a load of profit from producing Iron Man, which had a massive box office take, but must have also cost a lot to make. So what really goes into a director or producer making a profit, and what advice would you give to directors who wish to make a profit off of their movies?" Great question, Aiden. Now, to start off, I want to reiterate what I said about J. Michael Straczynski just recently when discussing contracts, and that's that you sign the best contract you can at the time. And what that means is that sometimes you don't have a lot of bargaining power, and you get the best contract that you can, and on the next round you'll get a little bit more. And that's exactly what happened to Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau is a great example of that advice. So let's walk ourselves through it. So of course, he directed Made. That was a big film for him. It was the first film he directed. He broke through in Swingers, but that was actually directed by Doug Liman. So even though he wrote it with Jon Favreau and starred in it, his first directorial effort was Made, which did not do very well. It tried to capitalize on the success of Swingers. And as you might recall, Vince Vaughn took off like a rocket off of Swingers because he was discovered by Steven Spielberg, and he put him in Jurassic Park 2. But not a lot of people paid attention to Jon Favreau. He couldn't get a lot of work off of Swingers. So he decided to go more behind the camera, which ended up being a very smart move for him. So he directed Made. Now, it didn't do very well, but it allowed him to get the Elf gig. However, because it didn't do well, and nobody was like giving it rave reviews, and he wasn't some auteur, the best thing he could get was the directing gig from Elf. And I'm sure he didn't get any points from that movie. If he did, they were surely off of net. No one's going to give somebody gross points after directing Made, and this is going to only be their second feature that they've ever directed. So he got an upfront paycheck, which I'm sure was, reasonable for the place that he was in his career at that point. But then he got to direct Elf, and he did a very good job with Elf, and Elf was a very big hit. So that led him to start to build his career and climb the Hollywood ladder. He then went on, I have his resume here, hold on. He then went on to direct Zathura, which did okay, didn't do as well as Elf, so he had a little bit of a hit there. But he still had Elf in his back pocket. So he would then go on to do Iron Man. Now, Iron Man was a very sweet deal, probably still made off of the success of Elf, and also he must have had a really great agent. Because Elf made $220 million off of a $33 million budget. That's amazing! So they might have said, well, Zathura just didn't click with audiences, he still has an Elf in him. So he got the Iron Man deal, and the Iron Man deal, maybe even the first Iron Man deal might not have been amazing. It might have been Iron Man 2 where things really came together for him. So he directed Iron Man. That movie, of course, as we all know, did amazing. So he signed on. Then this is where the deal might have, we don't know where he got the deal, between if it was Iron Man 1 or Iron Man 2, but somewhere he got a major deal with Disney. And because Iron Man, or Marvel Studios, I guess Marvel Studios at that point, but at that point in time for the MCU, Iron Man was really their only big franchise. So that's why everybody who was involved in Iron Man, like Robert Downey Jr., have the best contracts and the sweetest deals. Everybody else after that, it's gotten a little more crowded since then, and they weren't first in. So first in, you get to set things up, you kind of claim some responsibility for the success of everything, and you get a really nice, you get a really good position in terms of importance. So even though he was pushed off of the Iron Man movies in terms of a director and didn't direct 3 because 2 wasn't well received, although 3 wasn't well received either, which is why you're probably never going to see another Iron Man movie, solo movie again, or at least not for a very long time, something in his deal must have said he has to be an executive producer on any film that features Iron Man, because that's been the case ever since. He was a producer on Iron Man 3, an executive producer on Iron Man 3. He was also an executive producer on The Avengers, and he was also an executive producer on Avengers Age of Ultron. And he might not have done a single thing with the movie, But his contract stipulates he must get that producing credit because he's responsible for that character, the way it was shaped for the big screen. So that's a little bit about Hollywood contracts work. So the basic short answer of it is, Aiden, is that when he made Elf, he wasn't in a position in his career where he had any bargaining power. He just should be happy to get the gig. But when he made Iron Man, or when they were negotiating an Iron Man 2 contract, and they renegotiated a lot, as you might recall, between 1 and 2, because that's how Terrence Howard fell out of play. But there he had enough bargaining power that his agents, his management team, were really able to go to town and ask for a lot. And that's the way it works in negotiating. And some people have said, oh, well, that's greed. But that's the way the Hollywood game is played. So, and I think it's really important to remember that you might be sitting there going, well, I'd never do that because that's greedy and that's not fair play to my coworkers and my peers. Well, just remember that those same coworkers and peers will fight for the same really aggressive contract when their time comes. So you'll just be sitting there by yourself like a chump when you could have had tens of millions of dollars or perhaps even more, all these credits getting to go to all the premieres, etc., because you were decided you wanted to stand on principle. I think it's really important to understand how the Hollywood game is played, and if you're the only one who's going to try and change things, then you're not going to change anything at all except your own situation, for the worse. This is just the way it works. It's negotiating 101, and that's why everybody has representation. That representation goes at it, and they're very aggressive without the talent having to be aggressive. For instance, it's rumored that Bing Crosby was a real SOB. He was really difficult and really mean, but he had an amazing management team that would go and do those things for him and execute those really aggressive demands so he could go on making everybody believe that he was a sweetheart. That's just the way it works. That's business, and Hollywood is rare in that you're allowed to have a little bit of a buffer so that someone else does your dirty work, and that's, again, your management team. That's why agents have such a bad reputation sometimes. All right, so as for your question as to advice, how do directors who wish to make a profit off of their movies? I would say, be savvy. Understand where you currently are. Don't have, rose-colored glasses on when you're looking at your own resume, because you're just going to annoy the people you're negotiating with so much that you won't get the gig at all. I think it's important to understand where you stand in a hierarchy. Always, in every situation. This doesn't just apply to directing. This applies to social situations. This applies to any work situation. This applies to any place you might find yourself in. Have a realistic assessment of where you stand and what you have the power to do and what you don't. What can you back up and what is going to crumble as soon as you make the demand or the request, right? And then, so the reason I say that is because you want to get the Elf so you can get the Iron Man and then the et cetera, et cetera. Just understand that, each movie isn't, your career is going to be a whole bunch of movies, ideally. So get the best deal you can at the time, but you want to live to fight another day, right? And I think that we're all thinking, or at least I'm thinking here, Edgar Wright. No matter what Marvel was saying to him, how bad could it have been for him to torpedo his career this way? He didn't get the Star Trek 3 gig, probably because they blinked at the last minute over at Paramount over what happened with him and Disney and Marvel walking off the film after 8 years of development. And so it went to Justin Lin, who made maybe not some of the greatest Fast and Furious movies starting out, but eventually did, and now he's one of the hottest names in Hollywood. And he can make any movie he can cherry pick movies, although his Bourne movie is stuck in development hell. But still, he has a lot of really great, exciting opportunities ahead of himself. So look at James Wan and how he, I thought of him because he just did Furious 7 and took over for Justin Lin. But look how he slowly but surely built his career. You have a foundation and you want to take each rung of the ladder at a time, but understand that you're climbing a ladder. And eventually you will get to a position where you can make the money that you want to make and get what you feel is your fair share. Just like I don't understand why Joss Whedon complained. He shouldn't have gotten a big paycheck for Avengers. He was coming off of literally pretty much nothing. He directed one movie which failed, Firefly, which was his Serenity TV series, trying to be going to the big screen, and he basically just had a bunch of canceled TV shows to his name. Sure, he had a cult fan base, but nothing near what the Avengers really needed, and Buffy was really his only biggest claim to fame to date, and it wasn't on the air when he signed on for the Avengers. So he got the paycheck he needed, and now he got a very lucrative contract for Avengers 2, and that's just the way the game is played. And so the best thing that anyone can do is to not try and change the game or rally against the game. It's to understand the game, play it the best to your abilities, and that's how you will eventually win the game, or at least get to a position in the game where you feel very nice about yourself and what you've accomplished with your life and your career. All right, so that's my advice, Aiden. I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like us to cover tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.